Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. In the first 18 days of 2024, 6 countries have attacked at least half a dozen other countries. Now, the most recent attacks were Iran's strike on Pakistan. And just hours ago, Pakistan attacked targets inside Iran. Now, it's not World War III, but the world seems to be at war. And the spectre of conflict is moving across Asia very quickly. It was first Israel and Gaza, then it traveled down to Yemen, and now it's literally at our doorstep with the Iran-Pakistan conflict threatening to spill out of control. And joining me to discuss this very worrisome sequence of events over the last few hours, the impact of these wars on India, are Lt Gen Raj Shukla, member of the UPSC, foreign policy expert Dr. Rajen Harshe, and my colleague Deepak Bhadana in the studio in Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. General Shukla, I want to start by asking you, Iran and Pakistan attacking each other in a span of a few hours, it's almost unprecedented for a non-nuclear weapon state to attack a nuclear weapon state. And of course, Pakistan had to retaliate in a few hours. But explain to us, as a military strategist, what is the escalation ladder between Iran and Pakistan? And is there a possibility this could spill out of control, that there could be more such attacks, cross-border attacks between these two countries?
Sandeep, a few quick points. Yesterday I was listening to the Iranian foreign minister speak to Fareed Zakaria at Davos. And he had a novel explanation to give. He said, the targets we've struck on Monday and Tuesday in Kurdistan and in Syria and in Pakistan. With the states, we have wonderful relations.
Right.
We are just striking the inimical entities therein.
Right.
So the Mossad affiliated center in Kurdistan, the ISIS guys responsible for the memorial bombings at Soleimani's funeral site.
In Kerman,
and here, the Jaish-e-Adl, because it had struck an Iranian police station in December. So, now the distinction is not nuclear, non-nuclear. You can attack friends. all kinds of wonderful explanations.
That's it. You can attack friends with terrorists, as to alliterate on another phrase. But yes, go on, sir.
It had not been a serious matter. It is like defense ministers playing combat video games.
Yes.
No fun.
Yes.
It is getting as comical as that.
Right.
But see, on a more serious note, these trolls have been there in the wind for a while.
Right.
Bill Clinton, I think in the 1990s, said the economy is stupid.
Yes.
To me, it appears today it's national security and geopolitics.
Right.
And I'll give you some pointers. Walter Russell Mead, this great American thinker, for some time now has been saying that in 2014, we entered the pre-war era.
Right.
And you can rattle the number of conflicts off.
Right.
Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Nagorno-Karabakh, so on and so forth.
Right.
General Patrick Sanders, the very thoughtful British Chief of General Staff, at the IPAC conference 2 months back, told me that we are the war generation.
Right.
And look at this now. What is happening in the Middle East? America has these 11 aircraft carriers which it uses to project power. And there was a time whenever an aircraft carrier entered a particular theater, all the protagonists in the conflict, they took a step back.
Right.
What Iran has done over the last decade in response to these aircraft carriers, today the Americans have 2 off the Persian Gulf, 2 in the Red Sea. They have built these land instruments for projecting power, and very cleverly.
Right.
Hamas, Hezbollah, Shia militias in Iraq, and the Houthis.
Right.
And look at their prowess. The Hamas, what it did on 7th October, I mean, the savagery must be condemned, but it was a high-grade military invasion which took the mighty IDF by surprise.
Absolutely.
We call the Houthis rebels.
Yes.
I was shocked to discover that they own 70% of Yemen. They are virtual rulers.
Yes.
The missile arsenals of the Hezbollah and the Houthis
Yes.
will be more sophisticated than many advanced nations can boast of.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
this drone missile complex and the way
Yes.
it has been protected
Right.
by players from the global east,
Right.
Russia, North Korea, Iran, the lesser mortals.
Right.
And herein lies the lesson. These four instruments that Iran has created,
Yes.
Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah is a threatened being, they pose a very serious threat to Israel and also to the USA.
Yes. Absolutely.
What is happening is that the global east, this China and these 25 odd countries, in one dimension are doing far better than the global west.
Right.
And that is in converting economic surpluses and technological advantages into currencies of hard power.
Yes.
Europe is the richest cohort in the world, but mere wealth means nothing if you do not have the skills to convert it into hard power.
Absolutely.
And at least for the time being, it seems that the global east is posing a serious challenge to the global west.
Right.
In America, people are asking questions as to why do you have, you spend $950 billion, 800 bases around the world,
Yes.
11 aircraft carriers, and you lose in Afghanistan, deterrent fails in Ukraine, the Houthis attack you in West Asia.
Yes.
There are very strong possibilities of your abandoning Taiwan.
Right.
So the military instrument, and there is a phrase somebody used, the arsenal of democracy, which is the hard power which undergirds democracy,
Yes.
doing far less than the arsenal of non-democracies.
Right.
This is the lesson that we must learn, that mere wealth creation is not enough. You need to convert that wealth into currencies of hard power.
Absolutely. And, very interesting.
Escalation in West Asia doesn't surprise me. I've been tweeting this for a while. I quoted Walter Russell Mead and a whole lot of players.
Yes.
So, where you place your instrument of power in your strategic calculus is extremely important at this point in international relations. It does seem to be that, pecking orders are being determined by the quality of your proficiencies in hard power.
Absolutely.
And all the missile attacks and all that you are seeing are just an outcome of this broader trend.
Yeah, so there's there's a lot to unpack there, General Shukla, and the fact that you mentioned that how hard power is back in currency, it never went away, but increasingly that seems to be the situation, and the fact that as they say, it's not about the size of the dog in the fight; it's about the size of the fight in the dog. And I would add to what you said about the instruments like ballistic missiles; it's the size of the teeth of the dog as well, and not just the size of the dog. But
just 30 seconds.
Yes.
The point that you look at the value of asymmetricity.
Yes.
He's in Hamas. America's defense budget is 3 times that of China.
Yes.
Yes, China is causing displacement anxiety in Washington.
Right.
So the asymmetricity, China's defense budget was 2.5% of the GDP in 1995.
Yeah.
Today it is 1.9%.
Right.
It has transformed militarily in declining budgets. So the power of asymmetricity has to be seen.
Power of asymmetricity, the interesting point there. I want to bring in Dr. Rajen Harshe. So the MEA statement yesterday was very interesting, our MEA, where they said that Ministry of External Affairs said that this is a matter, responding to the strikes that Iran conducted in Pakistan, that this is a matter between Iran and Pakistan insofar as India is concerned. We have an uncompromising policy on zero terror. But the last line of this statement is interesting. We understand actions that countries take in their self-defense. Now, this is a point that General Shukla also mentioned, that we have friends, we are great friends with many countries, but we are not friends with the terrorists. So we are attacking terrorists in host of nations that are friends with us. How do you make sense of this whole statement and these series of attacks? That how is it going to play out in the next couple of days?
I think we have to think of several things as far as yesterday's statement was concerned. One is it's a genuine statement that Iran has done it in self-defense.
Yes.
And that in self-defense, when you're fighting a terrorist organization, self-defense is the only answer, and they have done it.
Right.
The second problem that I kind of consider from India's point of view and generally, but India's point of view, I'm talking specifically, is that Iran continues to be at the part of an energy heartland in West Asia.
Yes.
And India continues to import oil from Iran, but for few months when the United States had imposed sanctions on Iran.
Yes.
Now, when you import oil from Iran, a very major oil exporting country, major kind of import comes from Iran.
Right.
We save a lot of mileage because the route is directly on Arabian Sea.
Yes.
And we are connected to Iran via the kind of Chahbar port, where we are going to get Central Asia and access to Central Asia. Because China has Gwadar port and Pakistan connection, India has to have Iran as a very good friend.
Absolutely.
So somewhere India considers that it requires to kind of back up Iran in some particular measure. Now, the other side which General talked about also needs understanding somewhere, because if you look at Houthis or look at Hamas or Hezbollah, Iran is active there. But that particular note, you have to understand Iran in the context of entire West Asian region. So the whole region is in turmoil. Iran is rivaling whatever it may be with southern Saudi Arabia. Iran is also kind of trying to become important power, nuclear power. And circumscribed. America is trying to stop it. Western countries are going to stop it or stall it. And even Pakistan and India are nuclear states. So Iran feels why they are not. And their ambition for at least making nuclear power for peaceful purpose, they feel they recognize. So that part you have to also understand. Another important thing is Iran is necessarily an Islamic state. So somewhere, wherever there is a kind of Islam or Muslim population is under some kind of challenge, they would not sit idle.
Right.
The next point that you are raising about terror and terrorism, I think to me it is very important. Like, General talked about war and fights going to the east and east kind of posing different type of challenges in world politics. But I think terrorism is something of a different phenomenon. To fight a sub-conventional war, we still do not have technology to wipe out the terrorists.
Right.
And that's why, take Baluchistan's case itself, which has erupted. Baluchistan is a neglected area, a sparsely populated territory. It is backward area. It also displays backwardness of Pakistani administration. And that's why it has remained backward. And part of the Baluchi population is also in Iran. So Baluchistan people are wanting to fight for their self-determination, and we have to understand it. Why this point has to be understood more importantly is because unlike the Punjabis, Sindhis or Pakhtunwas, Baluchistan people do not have any place in Pakistan.
Right.
The seats are also merely 20 in the parliament. They have no place in Pakistan. And similarly, in the Pakistan region of Iran, Baluchis are there. But what is the place in entire Iran as a country? And that's why this is the kind of revolt which is at one level backward people are trying to carve out a state and nation for themselves.
Absolutely.
And they are revolting and they are doing it through terrorist methods. And under any conditions, terrorism has to be suppressed. So India has that logic.
Right.
When Hamas also kind of attacked, initially India kind of attacked the terrorism and terrorist methods.
Right.
But they didn't they immediately kind of withdrew and said that Palestinian people should not suffer for this.
Right. Right.
So billion people should remain and they should not be harmed. And terrorism under any condition has to be
cannot be used as an instrument of policy. I think that's right. India's stance is very clear on, and especially on Pakistan. But Deepak, there's a statement, a very interesting statement coming out of the US State Department just a few hours ago. And how does that change the balance of things as we're talking about?
I think it's kind of confusing as well. So they've called Iran as the source of terror in the entire region. But you must also recall that the US has called Pakistan, the hotbed of terror.
Of course, you must recall snakes in the backyard, and we know that.
So here, what I want to understand from the gentleman here, Dr. Harsh, how does he see the US statement now? They've already been involved against the Houthis at one end. Now they've criticized the Iranians as well. How do you see the situation evolving now?
We have to give some time before we react to US statement.
Right. And Jal Shukla, this, we were talking just before the show about how, in the midst of all of this, countries attacking each other, missiles flying around, drones, ballistic missiles, and what have you, we have India, which is experiencing a period of unprecedented calm and economic progress. We are the world's fastest growing major economy. We are almost untouched by internal conflict, save one that has been in the news of late. Would you call this the peace dividend that India has kind of built up for itself through very careful investments? And what would be your prognosis in the next couple of years to make sure that we realize this peace dividend and not get sucked into conflict or crises of the kind that we are seeing today? What should India do next?
Okay, see, what should India do next? I think we can find answers from the American plight, and that would also answer, I think, the question which Deepak raised. Look at America's dilemma today.
Right.
America knows that the pacing threat is China.
Yep.
It must make the rebalancing or it must do the pivot to the Indo-Pacific. But whenever it ventures to do so, it first gets entangled in Ukraine.
Right.
And now it is in serious danger of getting, sucked in by the swamp in the Middle East.
Yes.
And the question now before America is, do you fight in three theaters, or do you focus and win in one?
Right.
And the mighty Americans see, because they have neglected their military-industrial complex, look at their plight.
Right.
They don't have 7 days of missiles and munitions to fight in the Taiwan Peninsula.
Right.
7 days. Mighty USA.
Yes.
And who knows it? The Chinese know it. Privately, both Japan and Korea, I believe, have conveyed that in the case of, Chinese attempt to unify Taiwan forcefully, they may not intervene.
Right.
So I have serious doubts about the American ability to intervene in the first direction because of neglecting their military capacity.
Yep.
Look at the surprise of surprises. Russia is back in reckoning in the Ukraine war because of the artillery ammunition supplies it got.
Yeah, from North Korea. That's right.
North Korea and the combined West
Right.
could not give artillery munitions.
Yes.
Today, Russia's capacity, its military-industrial complex in terms of munitions, is twice the capacity of that of the West.
Right.
Look at what the Iranians have done. They took their drones to Ukraine, used the laboratory, refined the stuff, and penetrated the Iron Dome on 7th of October.
Yes.
Look carefully at Turkey.
Right.
It has become a drone superpower and is now rewriting the geopolitics of Eurasia.
Yes.
So I'm not making a point for militarism. But all I'm saying, and now let me come to the Indian context. I think the lesson for us is this, that the arc of conflict is bending towards the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
It could come to home.
Yes.
There was a time when we would say that stability is a precondition for growth.
Right.
Quotes the foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar.
Yeah.
He says, today India's challenge is to frame its rise amid serious unpredictability.
Yes.
And so it would seem to me that economic progress is, of course, fundamental. It is welcome. But we must use the luxury of time that we have to convert it into currencies of value. Come 27, 28, if a conflict comes to our door, we must not regret that when we had the time, we did not do enough in, pace and scale.
What is the, sorry to interrupt you, General Shukla, what is the significance of these dates, 2027 and 2028?
I'm just making a point that, look at this, you go back to Galwan, I keep going back to Galwan.
Yes.
There was no reason on earth for the Chinese to do what they did.
Right.
So there are no geopolitical or geostrategic drivers.
Yes.
They just seem to have made up their mind that there will be only one tiger on a hill.
Yes.
And therefore, the surest way to ensure peace is to strengthen our deterrence. When people say that, deterrence costs money, my response is, deterrence is costly, but wars are costlier. You don't believe me? Ask Ukrainians.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Harsh, I want to bring you on this. General Shukla, sorry to interrupt you, but just closing comments from Dr. Rajen Harshe on the point that you raised, the fact that what must India do in the next couple of years to realize this peace dividend? The fact that he mentioned that if you don't
I'll tell you what.
Sweat in peace, prepare to bleed in war. That's the line.
One point I thought I ought to make, and that is, as far as China, Russia, and Iran are concerned, they are trying to forge
Yes.
as far as Euro-Asian part is concerned.
Yes.
So India has to look at both Euro-Asia as well as Indo-Pacific region very
Yes.
carefully.
Right.
Now, how does one balance it? As far as India is concerned, of Jaishankar's visit to Iran somewhere has made different kind of headway.
Right.
India is also trying to negotiate with China, and Russia is India's traditional ally in terms of its arms relations and
Yes.
also many other relationships. As far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, India is becoming stronger country over the years. We
Right.
have we are capable of kind of not necessarily countering China, but making our presence felt from Malacca state to that entire region.
Yes.
And this, suppose India is able to kind of retain peace, more peace at home, more progress is possible, more
Yes.
trade is possible, more economic gains are possible, more
Absolutely.
connectivity is possible, more infrastructure related developments are possible, and all that India can achieve, more international collaborations are possible.
Yes.
And already kind of look at this policy has worked differently now, and it is moving forward. Indo-Pacific region, again, India is moving forward. And now Indo-Pacific region, we also include Southwest Indian Ocean countries. So it's a very vast area.
Absolutely.
And India is doing well in this entire area.
Dr. Harsh, I'm
And
sorry we're
similarly-
completely out of time, but
Yeah.
thank you very much for your comments. And General Raj Shukla, again, thanks so much for unpacking this very complex situation of Asia's proxy wars and the points that you gentlemen made, the fact that we have a peace dividend here, but we cannot take things for granted. That peace must be built on. We must prepare for any kind of contingency. But thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Now, the Red Sea is one of the world's most critical waterways. We know that what's happening over the last couple of days with the kind of disruptions in world trade and energy supplies. In fact, the RIS, which is the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, estimates that Indian trade could take a $30 billion hit because of the troubles in the Red Sea, with the Houthis attacking US ships, ships bound through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and the United States attacking targets in Yemen. Now, joining me to discuss these developments are my colleague Karthik Malhotra. Karthik, how worried is Indian trade with what's going on with those massive attacks on the Red Sea, literally on our trade corridors?
No, I think India has got to be very worried, and
Right.
I think India will have to hope that the fact that India has unfortunately become collateral damage when
Yes.
it comes to the conflict which is on in
Right.
the West Asia, Middle East, depending on where you see
Yes.
it from on the map. I think there's obviously reason for India to be worried. $30 billion is a large chunk of India's overall global trade, which we cannot afford to lose. And
Right.
any addition when it comes to your export cost, be it shipping, be it
Yes.
insurance, be it number of days that ships take, additional days ships take, being in the sea,
Yes.
all of that is obviously going to become dearer and dearer for all the countries that you export goods to.
Yes.
In that context, especially looking at India emerging as a China plus one alternative,
Right.
nobody's going to want shipments reaching them at a price which was not committed to earlier. And India tends to lose its competitive advantage as compared to China if it keeps its shipments in the sea for any longer than desired.
Absolutely. And in fact, joining us now is Mr. Prashant Chaturvedi. He's the Director General of the RIS. Mr. Chaturvedi, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you.
Tell us about the study that your institute just did, this very alarming figure of $30 billion that Karthik and me were just talking about. How did you come about this figure, and could it get worse with the fact that the hostilities have continued to, escalate?
Our estimation at this point is largely in terms of 6 to 7% of the $451 billion that we are trading in this part of the total exports of India, but also
Right.
in terms of this region. So we calculated with around 18 countries with which our trade would be affected.
Yes.
We have tried to figure this out with these 18 countries where our total export is somewhere close to $37.8 billion and our imports are almost $116.7 billion. So that we have tried to work out with the freight cost, which is somewhere going to go up by 25%,
Right.
insurance, which is already up, if you see, by 40%. So we have tried to calculate that which so far was $600 per 20 metric tons to 3,000 rupees, which
Yes.
is a huge jump which we are seeing. So our idea was to see how trade in that part of the world would be affected.
Right. Karthik, as Mr. Chaturvedi was mentioning, the fact that every other cost is going up, freight costs, insurance costs, and you're looking at a scenario that's not been witnessed in several decades, like we were discussing recently, where the tanker wars
That's right.
of the 80s. What could be our plan B for a scenario like this? Does India have a plan?
Unfortunately, Sandeep, it's just that our trade and especially our exports have to go to our Western counterparts,
Yes.
and that is where we are exporting to.
Right.
And in any case, India's exports haven't been great in the year 2023, FY24, as we
Yes.
refer to it, because of discretionary spending in the West reducing because of their own inflationary concerns.
Yes.
So very, very specific items like gems and jewelry, which would contribute to India's exports, have taken a massive beating.
Yes.
So in any case, there is a global, if not a recession in many parts, in
Yeah.
fact, even Germany has evaded recession, there is a slowdown in growth.
Right.
And in a largely inflationary scenario where
Yeah.
discretionary spending by consumers and institutions, companies, corporations internationally has
Yeah.
gone down, they would not want to add to their inflation by
Right.
encouraging getting in imports which become more expensive or take longer to reach their shores.
Right.
So obviously, I think there is reason for India to worry. India
Yeah.
can ill afford it right now, given
Yeah.
the fact that everybody from a World Bank to IMF is saying that India, which was once a bright spot, is
Yes.
now a shining star when
Right.
it comes to global trade and growth rates. India wants to continue growing at 7% per annum.
Right.
And the last thing we would want right now to disrupt our growth story is a ballooning current account deficit.
Yes.
Because we will also see, with the blockages, disruptions in the Middle East, in the Suez Canal area, oil coming into India could also become more expensive. Even though right now Brent
Right.
crude has stuck at about $77, $78, India
Yes.
has factored in 85. In its worst, the heydays of the Russia-Ukraine war,
Yeah.
we had seen crude go up as much as $212 a barrel.
Right.
We are still in the comfort zone.
Yes.
But I think the longer this conflict continues,
Yes.
the more pressure there would be on oil, the more pressure there would be on oil imports coming into
Right.
India and the cost thereof.
Absolutely. And Mr. Chaturvedi, you know, when your study came out a few days ago, we were looking at only a third conflict theater, right? And in the span of the last 48 hours, you have Pakistan and Iran literally firing ballistic missiles at each other, and fighter jets crossing the border, and these are two countries that are astride our economic, our lifelines, our fuel lifelines to West Asia. What is the possibility that a war between Iran and Pakistan, if it actually spirals out of control, how could it impact our oil supplies from West Asia?
As we have been saying, axis of resistance with the Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, all the three together require effort, and that's why, as we noticed, EAM, Dr. Jaishankar had to open dialogue with Iran. We have
Yes.
done that.
Right.
And India's response has been in terms of how do we contain all the three actors in
Right.
this scenario. With whatever reservations we might have,
Yes.
issues have improved in terms of how the prospects are. The cost of changing the route for our ships to come in from Cape of Good Hope is something that is going to delay the arrival of our containers, and of course escalate the cost with which we are trying to avoid that. And that would probably, our estimation is that in January already, for next 17 days, this delay is going to happen.
Right.
The containers all over the world, which were passing through this canal, they have actually come down to 72 now from 234. So
Right.
this has already gone down. Most of the containers coming to India have already taken the longer route.
Yes.
So their arrival would be delayed in February. The trouble probably if fertilizer and other manure related storage that we need, if it hasn't gone the way we wanted,
Yes.
probably that sector would also be affected. So our apprehension is more about March and April, where if slight spillover, the inflationary trends, the inability to cope up with the huge
Yeah.
domestic demand of fertilizers in the sowing season,
Right.
that probably would be something where more effort is required. Fortunately, government has acted well in time. A committee, interministerial committee headed by Additional Secretary in Commerce has already been constituted.
Yes.
And some efforts in terms of how do we leverage the current availability of inputs for fertilizer and manure industry, for agriculture sector,
Yeah.
for oil supply and their storage, how that can be done. More
Right.
dialogue with Mozambique and couple of other suppliers.
Right.
So that really help us cope up with the situation.
Absolutely. Diversify our energy basket as
That's
the
right.
government seems to be doing. And that trip to Iran by the foreign minister was very significant because it came in the middle of all of this. But Karthik, does this, as Mr. Chaturvedi was mentioning, that you're looking at diversifying our energy basket and suppliers, does this make other routes like the Chennai-Vladivostok route that's being spoken of, does that make it more attractive? Would that be a preferred route, given that there's no Taiwan war?
Yeah,
Thank God
I mean,
for
that's
that
what
yet.
I think we'll have
That's
to
another-
wait
yeah.
that you know, it doesn't, the flashpoint
Yes.
which is likely to emerge from Taiwan and China, that does not actually result in active military conflict, because
Right.
I'm not sure if anybody in the world can afford a fourth conflict right
Yes,
now, right? So I
yes.
think that is something that we should hope does not happen, at least does not happen immediately.
Yeah.
And yeah, but you know, I think expanding of the basket, these are good alternatives to have. I don't know if they can be stitched up very quickly. I don't
Yeah.
know if we can really go ahead and place those, you know, multi-million-dollar orders immediately,
Right.
while we also have existing relationships, long-term futures contracts with the nations that we import oil from
Yes.
at present. So, you know, annulling those contracts, creating new contracts, that could take time. But
Right.
I think it is definitely a good solution to have.
Yes.
It's a good alternative to have. We will have to expedite that alternative if we see that the conflict in West Asia continues, undesired as it may be.
Right.
I think India has very little control over what is going to unfold in West Asia as we go along.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking specifically about, you know, the conflict between Iran and Pakistan, right
Yeah.
now call it a skirmish or call it an extension of the war theater.
Yeah.
You know, there is just one looming question right now, Sandeep.
Yeah.
Can Pakistan actually afford it?
Right.
The fact that Pakistan itself is a triple
Basket
C
case,
rated
absolutely,
nation which has defaulted multiple times, has gone
Yes.
with begging bowls to any global institution out there,
Right.
you know, to fund its development growth.
Yes.
I really wonder, will Pakistan be able to continue with this conflict?
Right.
Iran may still have some support coming in from China. I
Yes.
don't know.
Right.
China will obviously also be conflicted at this moment. Should
Yeah.
it support Pakistan? Should it support Iran? And
Two
US
allies,
given-
Chinese
right.
allies.
So
yeah.
it may want to play the role of peacemaker,
Yeah.
or it may want to exploit the situation because
Right.
its own trade is not directly getting impacted irrespective.
Yes.
And I think the other point is that if Pakistan is unable to afford it,
Yeah.
is this the right moment for Pakistan to hope for some sort of weapons or funding coming in
Yeah.
from the US,
Right.
given the fact that US is also in election year?
Yes.
Would it want to support a war that does not have a direct bearing either on their old stand on, you know, restoring democracy or ensuring global
Right,
peace?
right. Mr. Chaturvedi, interesting points there by Karthik. Now, could you look at the crystal ball and tell us where this is headed in the next couple of months? I know it's a hard ask given the fact that no one expected Pakistan and Iran to attack each other. But, give us a forward, road where it's headed in the next couple of months. I mean, do you think that, for instance, could the Houthis kind of, if they stop attacking targets in the Red Sea, would it kind of bring down the specter of these tensions that you studied so carefully?
Now, I think with the entry of Pakistan, a situation has get more complicated.
Right.
And we should not forget that it is not Pakistan.
Yeah.
It is China.
Right.
And China is extremely keen to use these plots to attack
Right.
what they have been looking forward to, and that's the United States of America.
Yes.
So the trouble for the West and the cost escalation, particularly at a point when Biden administration is facing huge challenges, this is going to multiply.
Absolutely.
And this is
Yeah.
going to multiply in the days to come. Our idea is with Bahrain, the leveraging of strength that the US required, it has done that. But unfortunately, France has not supported. UK's response has also been very lackluster. Germany hasn't come forward. So you do not see Western allies on the same
Yeah.
page. Probably with the open entry of China, they may get united. But till Pakistan and Iran are fighting,
Yeah.
backed from both sides by China, we would see things becoming all the more complicated in the Red Sea.
Right.
That's point number one. Point number two would be a huge inflationary pressure for the goods that they are trying to import, particularly for the fact that Panama Canal is in what shape it
Yes.
is with the huge drought
Drought.
and lack of water.
Yeah.
So trouble to use. The idea would be to use goods that are coming in from China. And this discussion, if you see, has already started. More and more efforts in terms of leveraging the strength that Chinese economy provides in terms of supply chain disruption that US may end up with if these
Yes.
delays keep on happening. So gain would be for China.
Right.
The caveat here would be in terms of how other actors, particularly UAE and Saudi Arabia, whose economies would also be adversely affected, are positioning.
Right.
At this point, we see them not going against Israel completely.
Yes.
And that maneuvering space gives us hope that Hamas and Israel patch up. All the efforts from these quarters would be accelerated. To some extent, Iran is trying to use this axis of resistance
Yes.
with Hezbollah and Houthis, but also with Hamas. If UAE and Saudi both are on the same page,
Yeah.
Hamas probably may be content. And that we are seeing in terms of the economic gains out of this whole process that would strengthen and that would give support of how we look at this supply chain disruption that is likely to happen in the
Right.
days to come.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Chaturvedi. And it's a VUCA world that we're living in, and the road ahead seems to be increasingly complex and challenging. But thanks for helping us make sense of that VUCA world. And thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi, and my colleague
Thanks,
Karthik
Sandeep.
Malhotra. We'll leave you with this interview my colleague Geeta Datta did with Arab affairs expert Elizabeth Kendall, mistress of the Girton College in Cambridge. Thanks for watching.
The Israel-Hamas war, it started on 7th of October last year. Your thoughts on the fact that it's been going on for 100 days. What do you have to say about that?
I think this is extremely worrying, not to mention depressing. Of course, we have to take this in the long frame of history. This is a conflict that has been going on for many decades. But in recent flare-ups, one has hoped that it would die down again in a couple of months. And in fact, quite the opposite is happening. It's getting worse and worse. And we're seeing more countries being dragged into this. If we actually look at the map, we can see what's happening here. We have Israel completely encircled by countries that comprise parts of Iran's so-called axis of resistance. And this is not going to be easy to put back in a box. Each of those countries, this is not just Gaza to the west of Israel with Hamas, but Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, Shi'i-backed militias to the east in Iraq and the northeast in Syria, and of course the Houthis in Yemen to the south. Each of these players could be gradually ramped up, dragging in more Western reactions. So I think things look very worrying indeed.
You've talked about the axis of resistance, and you've talked about Iran. What is their game plan? Like you rightly pointed out, it is encircling, it has encircled Israel. What do you think is their game plan? What is the end that they're hoping to achieve in this war?
I think Iran was very unhappy at the expansion of the Abraham Accords, these agreements with Arab regimes with Israel to make peace. And it looked like Saudi Arabia might be about to also enter the Abraham Accords. So something had to be done. Of course, Iran's intention has been publicly stated the annihilation of Israel. So the last thing they want is for the Arab world and the Muslim world to start to come to terms with Israel. And at the same time, Iran has hankered for many decades after hegemony, greater control inside the Middle East, inside the Muslim world specifically. It's a Shi'i-based regime, and it has coveted the control, the power of Saudi Arabia, a Sunni-based regime. Now, if you can't change the religion of Sunnis to Shi'ism, which obviously you can't, then the next best card to play in order to win over populations is going to be Palestine, which is still an issue that arouses great empathy and sympathy amongst the Arab street.
Do you think that the Ukraine-Russian war also had any impact on any of the decision-making of this?
That's an excellent question. If you look at the broader geopolitics, then yes, the disruption more generally in the world and the balance of power and the international rules-based order is under great threat at the moment. So this was good timing by Iran and its partners. Of course, we should say that Iran says it didn't have forewarning of these attacks, but certainly it looks like there was a plan afoot. This works incredibly well for powers like Russia, like China, not just Iran, who would love to distract America from its support of Ukraine against Russia. This is just one more front to tangle up the United States and to show before the world that the United States is acting like world police and impacting the sovereignty of other nations. This plays to those kinds of Russian, Chinese, and Iranian narratives.
Have to come to the Houthis because you have written also about how they're really affecting global trade. India also has come out with its own report saying that we will be seeing the impact, if not already, and everybody is feeling the impact of the Red Sea attacks by the Houthis. Who are these people, Elizabeth? Let's start by addressing that.
The Houthis are a group that emerged in the northwest of Yemen. Now, they're a religious group, a military group, a political group, all at the same time. They take their name from their former leader, Hussein al-Houthi, who was killed in 2004, and their current leader has the same name. He's one of his brothers, Abdul Malik al-Houthi. But they're much more than just a tribe. Their religious base is really important because it informs their politics. They are a branch of Shi'ism called Zaydism. And that's important because, of course, they have this Shi'ism in common with Iran as fellow minorities within the Islamic world. And, of course, their political arm is actually called Ansar Allah, which means partisans, supporters of God. So that shows how closely entwined their politics is with their religion. Now, I should just mention that when they began to mobilize back in the 1980s and in the 1990s, they began a movement called the Believing Youth. This was in response to what they saw as their marginalization, religiously, economically, politically, and they had quite a bit of sympathy. But since then, their ambitions have grown, and it's about much more than simply fighting back against marginalization. Now they have ambitions to extend their authority really over the whole of Yemen.
And what is it that they want from these disruptions?
So the Houthis share with Iran and Hezbollah and others on the so-called axis of resistance of Iran, a desire to see Israel not just contained, but annihilated. Their slogan, the Houthi slogan, is death to America, death to Israel, a curse on the Jews, and victory to Islam. That's very similar to the slogans of Iran and its partners. And so now is a great opportunity for them to start living up to their slogan. Now, I don't think, however, that we should see this as completely opportunistic on their part. There's a genuine belief that they'd like to do this. That said, politically, their motives are to increase their popularity, not just with their base, which is, of course, very tired after nearly a decade of civil war in Yemen, but also more broadly in Yemen and around the Arab world. There's great sympathy for the Palestinian cause, and there don't seem to be a whole lot of people standing up for Palestine. So the Houthis have won themselves a lot of support. And beyond that, the Houthis also have other elements to gain from their actions in the Red Sea. On a regional level, they increase their leverage with Saudi Arabia, Saudi is trying to extract itself from the Yemen war at the moment, and seeing this antagonistic neighbor to its south, it doesn't want to annoy it further, so it's getting more concessions. It's giving more concessions to the Houthis. And then finally, internationally, well, the Houthis gain massive publicity, both for themselves and for the Palestinian cause, and they ensure that the rest of the world feels some of the pain of Israel's actions in Gaza. These are just the kinds of events in the region that could tip matters over into a much broader war. So the Houthis clearly want to show that the US and UK strikes have not impacted their ability to operate, and more importantly, have not scared them, have not dented their fervor for war. And I think the Houthis will have been prepared for US and UK strikes, not just prepared in terms of hiding some of their equipment and also preparing for follow-up attacks. They will have been hoping for it because it proves everything that they've been saying about America as an imperial power trying to launch a war on Islam. This is how they are framing it. And they now have some evidence for that, as they would see it. And of course, they're used to suffering airstrikes. They suffered over 25,000 airstrikes from the Saudi-led coalition during their civil war, and it didn't stop them. And they're hardened fighters. They've managed to keep at bay some of the Middle East's most high spenders on defense for the last 8 and a bit years. That's the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And they haven't given up. So worth remembering here is that the Houthis do not need to be accurate like the US and the UK need to be accurate in their strikes. The Houthis simply need to keep launching missiles out into the Red Sea at anything, because that is enough to disrupt shipping and to rattle financial markets and to therefore have knock-on effects around the rest of the world.